Bhagavai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavanai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Akhandamandalakaram Vyatam yena characharam Tatpadam darshitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurudeva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Stavaram Jamvanam Vyaktam Yatkinchit Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapiyat Sarvam Yogyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratigoditam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambartvamanusandadami Bhagavad-gite Bhagavadreshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Bharatara Stunvanti Divyaistavai Vede Samgapadakramopanisadai Gayanti Yam Samada Dhyanavastita Tattvatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yashyantanna Vidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So last time we finished number 35. Okay, so having summarized in verse number 30 that all the previous verses which were focusing on the self-knowledge about the eternal self, the indweller, and because of that indweller who is indestructible. Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna that you should not grieve, okay? And that is the summary of all the things which he had said in the previous verses. And from verse 31, then we see that he begins to talk about what Gurudev calls the common man's point of view. Okay? So from the highest kind of Vedantic principles, he comes down to the common man's view in terms of what is your duty, what is your swadharma, and what you should be doing in terms of your situation in which you find yourself. And here, of course, there are hints as to what is the approach one should take in terms of one's transactional life. Of course, from verse number 39 onwards, he then elaborates on the part of Karma Yoga. Okay? And chapter number 2, as we know, is really a summary of the whole kind of concept of the Bhagavad Gita, whereby what are the ways, what are the pathways by which we can actually come to understand our life, come to transact in the life within the framework of the spiritual aspect of ourselves. Okay? So, in the first part of the chapter 2, he is describing to us the highest philosophical knowledge, the metaphysical principles on which we should be looking at everything in our life. Okay? And therefore, even right down to our common experience of what we are experiencing here and now has to be related to the highest metaphysical principles of the self, of Atman, of Brahman, and how that actually determines what we are doing in terms of a transactional life. But even at the level of the transactional life, in terms of what we have to do, and here we saw that Arjuna has got these two problems of being overcome by extreme emotion, at the same time not knowing what to do. Okay? So the second part, of course, as we are saying, is addressing this problem of what should I do in the world, having got confused about what my right course of action is in this particular circumstance. So here he is starting to address the Karma Yoga part of the whole idea of Bhagavad Gita, and we see that he's starting off in a kind of gentle way, as it were, by kind of directing him to the common man's point of view, which is saying that verse number 31, for example, is talking about if you look at your own Swadharma, you should not waver, because there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war. So he brings this elements of two things. One is the relationship between one's own Swadharma, one's own duty, and the action one should be taken based on that Swadharma. Okay. So we have got these ideas now beginning to be kind of introduced into the into the text, which is saying that there is a relationship between Swabhava, Swadharma, Dharma, and the transactions which are going to take place. Okay? So the immediate point which is Lord Krishna is making here is that if you understand your own Swadharma, which means you as a Kshatriya who has got these qualities and characteristics of leadership, heroism, courage, etc., you should be thinking about what you are supposed to be doing in this situation, which is the battlefield. And here it is a question of fighting the righteous war. So the link between Swadharma and the action is really that one should understand what is the right action based on one's Swadharma, and if you understand what is really the right action based on one's Swadharma, then there is no doubt, there is no confusion about what one should be doing. Okay. And here again in verse number 32, then he points out that if there is an opportunity or a circumstance in which the Swadharma is actually applicable at that point, then that is the greatest opportunity. Okay. So wherever we find that there are opportunities for us to actually express our Swadharma, then it becomes like he's telling Arjuna here that it is an open door to heaven. So what I was saying earlier is that here are hints which Lord Krishna is already giving him, that there is a connection between Swadharma, the expression of Swadharma, and what one should be doing in terms of what is the right action and the consequences of right action, which is that it becomes an open door to heaven. In other words, the merits which are gained, the punya which are gained, because we have connected these two things in the right way, then becomes the the gain which we have in terms of this open door to heaven. Okay. So the kind of underlying mechanism according to which this is going to work, of course he's going to tell us later on, but really this is kind of the overview of what is the basis on which the action one should be taking. And then of course he is talking about the positive aspect, and then in 33 he was talking about the negative aspect. If you don't fight this righteous war, in other words, then if you say that here's my Swadharma, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and then you deliberately, consciously don't do what you're supposed to be doing, then what happens? You will incur sin. Okay. So either you incur punya, which is that now you have aligned your Swadharma to your transactions. In other words, you're taking the actions according to your understood duty, or if you don't do that, then of course there's the question of you're going to incur sin. Now here sin, of course we have to understand it in the right way, and Gurudev is telling us what really sin is in terms of the overall kind of philosophy of Hinduism, which is saying that it is a mistake of the mind in which it acts contrary to the essential nature of the self. Okay. So now we have the overall connection now between the self, the Swadharma, and the transactions which are taking place. Okay? So we need to understand that as well. That what is this connection between the essential nature, which is the self, the expression of that essential nature in terms of our own Swadharma, and then the expression of that Swadharma in terms of our transactional life, and how all this needs to be connected together in order for us to to actually go along the pathway of increasing our punya. And if we don't do that, then it becomes a sin. So in other words, what Gurudev was talking about, sin in Hinduism is considered a mistake of the mind in which it acts contrary to the essential nature of the self. Now, for us, if we now think about, okay, what is my Swadharma? Do I know what this self is, and how am I to understand this self, and how am I to understand this Swadharma? And then how am I going to translate that into particular actions on a daily basis? Now that becomes our problem as well, isn't it? So we have to kind of think about what is the framework within which we have to start thinking about this. So already this is now setting the framework within which he is going to explain that if with a certain attitude and a certain frame of mind and a certain understanding of the underlying principles, if we then act in the world, then it is surely the pathway towards the door of heaven. This is what now, Lord Krishna is taking Arjuna towards that kind of thinking. So, and then of course he's telling him, coming down again right to the ground level, whereby he's saying, okay, now if you run away from this battlefield, what are people going to say, right? Just like we argue with some of our friends and our colleagues and our family and say, okay, now if you don't do this, what your friends are going to say about you, right? What your brother and sister and what your parents are going to say about you, right? So coming down right down to the level of even identification, and that you are this kind of person. Now what are people going to say if you don't do things which you are meant to be doing? And if you don't do that, then dishonor will actually come to you. And then the one who has always been honored, see, Arjuna was of course being honored by all different kinds of people on all different levels of the society, where he was seen as one of the greatest archers of his time. Indeed, the greatest archer of his time. Okay? And he was honored in that way as a Kshatriya, as a leader of the Pandavas. In that way, if with that kind of honor which he has, and he does something which is absolutely contrary to that, then of course this dishonor is going to come about. And he is saying that dishonor for a Kshatriya is like death. Dishonor is more than death, he is saying. So to incur that kind of dishonor, he's telling him now, if you even think about it at even that level, then this dishonor should make you really very uncomfortable. That here you are as a Kshatriya with all this honor, and if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, dishonor will come onto you, and that dishonor should really make you think twice as to what you're doing. So then, not only what people will say, but what about your peers? Right? We were talking about peer review, whereby we think about our own kind of level of people, and we have this perception that okay, this person is kind of at the same level as me, and I am kind of interested in what these kind of people are going to talk about me and say about me, because that is an important part of my reflection of my own self. Okay? So when we look towards the people who are at our perceived at our own level, that becomes an important part of our own understanding of how other people are judging us. So here he is talking about the great battalion commanders who are equivalent to Arjuna, and he is saying that even if you think about those people and they think that, oh, now Arjuna has actually run away from the battlefield. Out of what? Out of fear. And if they now perceive Arjuna, you, as somebody who is running away, out of fear, just out of fear, then that is going to be really bad for you, because having considered your heroism in the past, and they look at you now and you see that Arjuna is running away from the battlefield because of fear, your people who have held you in high esteem, these battalion commanders, are actually going to hold you lightly. In other words, they're going to laugh at you and say, oh my God, look at this guy who is the hero of our times and is running away from the battlefield. And therefore, that is, if you consider even that, then it should make you to really think about what you're saying and what you're arguing about, and arguing against fighting the war. So moreover, then we go on to the next one, which is verse number 36, which says,
Avachyavadam Shabahun Vadish. Got this Shruti wrong, sorry. Ishan Avachyavadam Shabahun Vadishyanti Tavahitaha Nindantastava Samartyam. Okay, I'll do it from the first. Sorry.
Okay, start it there.
Avachyavadam Shabahun Vadishyanti Tavahitaha Nindantastava Samartyam Tato Dukkataram Nukim.
Okay, so, and he is saying now, many unspeakable words will your enemies speak, cavilling your powers. What can there be more painful than this? So here is what he is doing in the last two verses indeed is that he is appealing to Arjuna's sense of his own self. Okay, when he's saying that now, if you think about that, what you represent to yourself, then not only the people will say that Arjuna is has brought this dishonor upon himself, and this dishonor can be nothing worse than death for a Kshatriya. Not only that, but the battalion commanders who are his equivalents will actually laugh at him because he's running away from the battlefield in fear. And then what about the enemies? The enemies will say, will speak unspeakable words, cavilling your powers. So yes, if you think that you are a Kshatriya and you've got this abilities and the enormous skills which you have in terms of fighting battles, not only in terms of leadership but in terms of even the weapons he's using, etc., then your enemies will speak unspeakable words. In other words, you'll find them abusing you. And what can be more painful than this for a Kshatriya? So in other words, he's focusing Arjuna's attention on his identity as a warrior, right? And if we now think back and see what Arjuna was arguing about those five arguments he was making, he has actually forgotten that he's a Kshatriya, right? Therefore, Krishna is reminding him that you are a Kshatriya. Remember that you're a Kshatriya, and therefore if you now think of yourself as an ordinary human being, which you were doing before, and an ordinary human being thinks in terms of kith and kin, in terms of attachment, in terms of the terrible consequences of war, and all these kind of things. It is the ordinary person who is not a Kshatriya who will begin to think like that, and therefore will have so many arguments against fighting. So here, then Lord Krishna, in his own subtle way, is telling him, remember that you are a Kshatriya. And if you remember that you are a Kshatriya, therefore you have to remember what your Swadharma is. What is your Dharma as a Kshatriya? And if you perform the Dharma which is you, which belongs to you as a Kshatriya, then there is no doubt that you will incur punya. And if you fail to do that, then the consequences are that not only will you incur sin, but all these people are talking about will laugh at you one way or the other. Okay? So here again he is emphasizing the point and driving home to Arjuna, like Gurudev is saying, the folly in running away from the battlefield. So scandalizing his glorious name and chivalry in foul language too indecent even to repeat. Okay, so this is what the enemies do anyway, right? They will find ways in which, of course, how to bring Arjuna down by speaking all the bad words about him, and of course this is how we see that human nature is such that in terms of people who are always looking for an excuse, isn't it? Our enemies are always looking for an excuse just to point out, yeah, you see, I told you, this guy is useless. He's running away from the battlefield. And therefore, Lord Krishna is telling him that this is what's going to happen to you if you fail to do your duty as a Kshatriya. So we'll go through this fairly quickly, because then we are coming up to the point whereby he then begins to kind of go into the substance of Karma Yoga. Okay, so 37. Now when you fight with Karna and such other great heroes on the Kaurava lines, what Gurudev is talking of, then what is going to happen? With this in mind, that yes, you are a Kshatriya and therefore if you fight, then what is going to happen is expressed in the next verse, which is verse number 37, which we'll chant now.
Ato va prapsyase swargam,
Ato va prapsyase swargam,
jitva va bhuksyase mahim,
jitva va bhuksyase mahim,
tasmad uttishta kaunteya,
tasmad uttishta kaunteya,
yuddhaya krita nischayah.
yuddhaya krita nischayah.
Okay, so in this battlefield, slain you will obtain heaven, victorious you will enjoy the earth, therefore stand up, O son of Kunti, resolved to fight. Okay. So these are the two options. Okay, if you do what you are supposed to be doing as a Kshatriya, which means you do your dharma, you fight the battle, and either consequence. And there are two consequences. One is that yes, you are going to be slain. Yes, okay, that's fine. But that means that you will obtain heaven. remember he was talking earlier that if there is no highest duty for a Kshatriya than to fight a righteous war. So the highest duty which leads to the highest result, which is obtaining the heaven, is what he's reminding him again, and is kind of summarizing this last few verses by saying that even if you get killed in this battle, then you will obtain heaven. Okay, because that is the punya for you, that is the highest merit you will achieve in terms of fighting what you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And in any case, if you get slain, if you don't get slain, if you're victorious in battle, then what will happen is that you'll enjoy the earth. Okay? So the victory will mean that he's going to gain the kingdom. He's going to get the pleasures which arise out of that gaining that kingdom, and therefore the enjoyment which is going to follow from there will also be his. So, considering either of these two consequences, then he is saying that you must then resolve to fight, because that is the one way of trying to understand your situation, and therefore, if you think that you have to make a choice, and choosing to fight the battle, then there are two consequences. One is that either you get killed and then you'll attain heaven because you've done your highest duty. If you don't get killed, then you will still be victorious, and therefore you will enjoy the earth. But on the other hand, if you refuse to fight the battle, he has already pointed out that not only will he incur the sin, but people will laugh at him and talk badly about him. So he is going to attain this heaven, like Gurudev is saying here. He shall suddenly come to enter the heavens of the heroes, Veera Swarga, and to stay there and to enjoy there for eons. Okay? So the enjoyment either in this life or in the life hereafter is available to Arjuna if he decides to fight the battle in the right way. So here, Lord Krishna is not actually going any further than that. Okay, he's just stopping at the point of telling him that the consequences of doing the transaction in the right way actually leads towards enjoyment either in this life or in the life hereafter. He has not actually framed it within the consequence of the spiritual pathway. Okay, and here we will see that when Gurudev later on talks about that every transaction which we have in our life has to be looked at from all these four dimensions. The four dimensions meaning the physical, the mental, the intellectual, and the spiritual. Okay? So we will see that what Krishna in fact is doing is looking at all these four dimensions, a 360 kind of view of Arjuna's condition. Okay? Now sometimes we forget the other dimensions, like what Arjuna did was to just focus on one particular dimension, one or two dimensions, instead of the totality of this perspective. So when Arjuna is actually thinking about now the physical aspect of getting killed or having to kill, that is one aspect, that is a physical aspect. He relates it to the emotional aspect in the sense that this is going to cause me a great amount of anxiety. Okay? He's not thinking about the intellectual part of it. In other words, the moral dimension, yes, he's touching on it only a bit, but he's not analyzing to it in terms of the greatest depth. And then he's not looking at the spiritual aspect of it at all. So in other words, what is happening is that Arjuna's condition is arising out of a skewed judgment. In other words, that he is only looking at part of the problem and part of the solution, and therefore he is coming to the wrong conclusion. Okay. And what Lord Krishna has to do is to expose him to all the different dimensions and to tell him that yes, you have to look at this whole situation from all points of view and then come to the right conclusion. And the truth about the whole matter, when all these things are considered, if you come to the right conclusion, then that is your pathway towards the right action. Okay. So here he is only stopping at telling him that the consequence of doing the right thing is that either you will enjoy in this life or you will enjoy in the hereafter. So what is then the kind of summary of all these things then comes up in the next verse, which is now Lord Krishna is saying, now listen to the advice I offer you while you fight the battle. Now, and he's saying now, okay, yes, the only option I'm telling you have is actually to fight the war. But under what condition, under what kind of mental mindset will you be fighting the war? Is here extending it now, slowly by slowly, is extending it to this spiritual dimension. Okay? And this is what he says in the next verse, number 38.
Sukha dukkhe same kritva
Sukha dukkhe same kritva
labha labho jaya jayo
Labha labho jaya jayo
tato yuddhaya yujyasva
Tato yuddhaya yujyasva
Nivam papam avapsyasi
Nevam papam avapsyasi.
Okay, so from this point onward, of course, as I was saying earlier, that chapter 2 is a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. It kind of brings these three pathways: the path of Jnana Yoga, the path of Bhakti Yoga, the path of Karma Yoga, and it is summarizing in a very brief way what these pathways are. And here, from this stanza onwards, Lord Krishna is kind of explaining the pathway of Karma Yoga. Okay. And here we see that, okay, now if you're going to fight the battle, then under what is your mental inner attitude with which you should be fighting? And he's saying here, having made pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat the same, you engage in the battle for the sake of the battle. Thus you shall win and not incur sin. So far, the whole argument which Arjuna is saying, okay, now, there will be either, this pain or pleasure, there's going to be some kind of gain or some kind of loss. If I gain this kingdom, then, it is going to be bloodied because I have slain all this kith and kin, etc. And victory and defeat and all these are dualities, what are called dvandvas. These dualities are the ones which are actually making me to get confused in the whole thing. Not only is the confusion arising, but a lot of inner turmoil is taking place as well. See, what Arjuna is experiencing is this extreme agitation. Okay? Extreme agitation as a result of these dualities. Right? And this is also a common condition, is that when we experience this, okay, what about honor, what about dishonor, what about pleasure, what about pain, and what about victory, what about defeat? When we are caught up between these two currents, what happens? See, either way, when we become anxious about victory or we become anxious about defeat, one way or the other, when the attachment is either to one of those dualities, what happens is that we get a lot of agitation in the mind. Okay? So here he is pointing, Lord Krishna is pointing to a very important principle. The principle of the state of the mind which is conditioned by the dualities. Okay? And when we are caught up in these dualities which are ever present in our thinking and in our in our experience, when we are caught up in these dualities, what tends to happen is that we not only get confused, but we also have a lot of agitation in the mind. Okay? And this sometimes expresses itself as, shall I or shall I not? Shall I or shall I not? What should I do? Because if I don't win this particular battle, then this is what is going to happen. If I do win this battle, then, am I going to be able to enjoy it or not? All these various different types of thought arise because of this tension between the dualities. Okay? And when we get caught up in the tension, it creates an inner tension. And that inner tension not only leads to confusion, but also the agitation. So here we have got three pairs of opposites, which Lord Krishna is pointing out. Okay? And we can see it is a systematic development of what he's talking about, because the three sets of dualities point to the three levels of experience. And the underlying principle is that these three dualities at the level of our ordinary experience can only be transcended. In other words, the solution to these dualities lies beyond the dualities. Okay. Now this is a very important principle, because then it brings us into the spiritual dimension of this whole scenario under which Arjuna is now suffering and is getting confused. Okay. So if we look at the three pairs of opposite, one is the pain and the pleasure. So the pain and the pleasure which Gurudev talks about here is the intellectual awareness of experience which are favorable and unfavorable. So that is at the intellectual dimension, at the intellectual experience, the level of experience. So intellectually we can think of pain and pleasure as something which is going to be abstracted from our experience at the level of the body or the mind or the intellect in terms of totality of the being. And the intellect actually understands it either as pain or pleasure according to whether it is favorable or unfavorable. So that is the intellectual duality. Then we have got the gain and the loss. Okay? The gain and the loss is at the emotional level, at the mental level, whereby there is joys of arrival and sorrows of parting. Okay? So what does it mean? If I say I have gained something, it is that I have acquired something, and that acquisition was based on my desire, which was pushing me to actually act in the world so that I can gain what I need to gain, and therefore that gain will actually give me satisfaction and joy because it has arrived in my life. Or if I lose it, in other words, either I lose things which I already have, okay, and this is what was bothering Arjuna, that these are my kith and kin and these are my family. If I lose these people who I am attached to, especially the gurus, then it is going to cause the sorrow of departure. This is what Gurudev is telling us. That either we gain something because we want to gain it, and that desire is pushing us to gain it so that we can get a sense of completeness out of it, and that will give us the joy of the arrival, or something which is departing from us, or we don't gain what we want to gain, then that parting will cause the sorrow. So it is an emotional experience which arises out of this duality of gain and loss. Then the third thing is conquest and defeat. So here he is talking about the physical level, okay, having considered the intellectual and the emotional. The physical part is about conquest and defeat. Now these things, these dualities are not completely separate. We can't say, okay, now this is intellectual, this is emotional. They are interrelated, but the emphasis is on one aspect or the other. So here the conquest and the defeat, of course, is a perception. whether I win or not win is actually not only analyzed by the intellect, but it's also there is an emotional reaction which is attached to either conquest or defeat. But we can think of it as primarily at the physical level, whereby I conquer something or I get defeated in the process, and that is primarily at the physical level of winning or losing. So in this case, the conquest is about the conquest of the kingdom, the losses and the defeat is about losing that kingdom, and therefore it is something physical more physical rather than emotional or intellectual. So now what is the principle here? If we think about that, we are always confronted with this kind of dualities at all different levels of our experience. Okay. So for example, in terms of the physical aspect, if we think about the sensations which arise from the from the physical self, we are confronted by the heat and the cold. Okay. How do we do that? Actually, we try to rearrange the circumstances of our life externally so that we can minimize this duality of heat and cold. For example, how do we do that? When we come into Shiva's room here, what has he already done? He has heated up the house. Okay. Or when we wear these warm clothes, what are we trying to do? We are trying to breach the gap between the dualities. We are trying to say to ourselves, okay, here's the cold, how can I bring that cold, take that cold away and locate myself somewhere in the middle, or how can I take the heat away so that I can locate myself in a comfortable physical situation, because I'm confronted by these two realities. That is the normal way in which we try to do these things. Then, by external arrangement and rearrangement of our circumstances, that we try to transcend the duality. In the same way, emotional dualities, we try to either take away the sorrow or to gain the happiness, one way or the other. Okay? We try to shield ourselves, just like I'm shielding myself by wearing this fleece jacket. We try to shield ourselves from emotional negativities. At the same time, we try to bring in as much emotional positivity as possible. And there are many different ways in which this can be done. Okay, so emotionally, again, what we try to do is that we emotionally arrange and rearrange the elements of what is giving us the joy and the sorrow in such a way that we locate ourselves somewhere in the middle, which is a comfortable place for us to be. And similarly, in the intellectual way, we begin to position ourselves in between the dualities. Okay? In other words, what are we doing? We are creating a comfort zone. Okay? The comfort zone, which is the place where all these dualities are as much excluded as possible. So that comfort zone now, for me, is where I am comfortable. And how have I got to that place of comfort is by arranging and rearranging the things in my life. Not only the things, but also the beings and the situations and the circumstances. Okay. But Krishna is telling him that is absolutely the wrong approach. This is not the right way of doing things. Okay. It's not the right way, because arranging and rearranging is an endless task. We can keep on arranging and rearranging the people in our life. Okay? And this can happen. You say, oh yeah, this is a good friend of mine, I think I'll go along with this guy, and then all of a sudden you fall out, and then you want to throw that away. Now you arrange and rearrange your furniture, you rearrange and arrange your heating thermostat, and so on and so on. You keep on arranging and rearranging, but what happens? What are we trying to do? You see, we've got a fundamental problem here. On the one hand, the situations keep on changing in our life. And this is what Lord Krishna had hinted on earlier on, that we are confronted with this ever-changing situation in the phenomenal world. Things are changing, beings are changing, circumstances are changing, and in that changing situation, what are we trying to do? We are trying to arrange and rearrange and rearrange and arrange again. Okay. So imagine that now, all of a sudden we find ourselves that in this room, the furniture keeps on changing around by itself. So we have to rearrange the furniture to make sure that we are comfortable in the place in which we were before by rearranging this furniture. Okay. In the same way, we kind of try to arrange and rearrange the circumstances of life, which are ever changing, and it is an endless battle. Okay. And that is not the solution. That is not going to give us, neither is it going to give us equanimity, which is what this verse is talking about, nor is it going to give us the victory in that particular sense of the word. And if we try to kind of manage these dualities in the wrong way, then agitation will arise and we'll keep on struggling with life. And therefore the art of living, what Gurudev is suggesting here, is that we deal with these dualities in the right way. Okay? And what is the right way? Is to find that place which is the place of equanimity in all this chaos which is taking place externally and internally. Okay. So we can see already now we are beginning to move into the spiritual dimension, because this particular poise of mind, this place where these dualities no longer affect me, there is only one place. Okay? There is only one place, and which is the eye of the storm. Okay? Which is the place where it is absolutely calm and quiet, and without any perturbation, without any agitation. There is only one place, which Gurudev points out is the poise of the witness. Okay? So in other words, if we think of the dualities as two opposite points of the pole, okay, there are two ways in which we can deal with it. One is we keep on kind of going back and forth between these 2 points, these 2 poles of the extremities. On the one hand, you got the gain; on the other hand, you got the loss. We can keep on kind of flicking between the two of them. By what? By arranging and rearranging the circumstances of life, by trying to do this and trying to do that, and we try to find ourselves in the right place as far as the gain and loss is concerned. Or we can create a third point in the whole scheme of things, whereby we lift ourselves from these 2 points into a third point, which is the neutral point. And that neutral point is nothing but the poise of the witness. So what happens then? We are no longer kind of going between these 2 dualities. We have lifted ourselves from these dualities into this quiet, calm harbor, place where there are no storms at all. It is a place where we can be comfortable in such a way that none of these dualities are going to affect us. Not only that, but once we place ourselves in that particular place, we can do whatever we want to do in the right way, in the dharmic way, and if we do it with that inner poise and inner attitude and transact in the world, then not only will we get the victory which he is talking about, but we will not incur sin either. So he is already laying down the principles of Karma Yoga here. Okay? Because Ishvara Arpan Buddhi and Prasad Buddhi, how can that be obtained? We see that it is going to take us beyond the duality of the me and the mind and our attachment to the result of the action, towards a poise which is going to take care of both these things. Okay, not only the identity of the me and the mind, but also our attachment to the fruit of the action. Okay. So already the seed of Karma Yoga is being laid down by Lord Krishna, whereby he says the art of living is really contained in this very important principle of lifting ourselves beyond the dualities in such a way that none of these things is going to affect us. So on the one hand, the disidentification from me as an individual, from the dualities which are experienced at the level of the body, mind, intellect, disidentification from all this and identification with the witness of all these things which are going on, this is the method of yoga. Okay. When we talk about yoga, then this is exactly what we are talking about, and this is what Gurudev calls inspired living. The truly inspired living can come from this way in which we live our life in an inspired way. And he says this is the difference which makes between ordinary kind of living and inspired living. The inspiration is not a result of our gain and loss, sorrow and happiness, but really the inspiration comes from a different source altogether. And that different source is nothing but our true self. And that true self is the one which is going to be the basis on which we are going to exist in the world, in this phenomenal world, disidentifying from this body, mind, intellect, and therefore from the dualities, and to locate ourselves in the witness poise, and therefore that becomes the way of inspirational living and a living which is going to give us the right way of gaining what we need to gain. So, then to summarize, then what Lord Krishna is kind of exposing Arjuna to the other dimensions of thinking. He is telling him, don't just think that you are in this battlefield and you're going to get slain, or you're going to kill these people, and you've got the emotional attachment to these people. You limited your thinking, you limited your vision to very narrow kind of point of view, and if you think of it in that way, then you're going to get into trouble. Okay? It will give rise to confusion, it will give rise to agitation. What you need to think about is these other dimensions which I'm telling you about, these other ways of thinking, and if you take that into account, then that truth which is at the base of all these different dimensions, which is the base, which is the basis of your true nature and your true essence, that is the basis on which you should be transacting in the world. In other words, the basis on which you're going to fight this battle is to go beyond the dualities, locating yourself in your true spiritual self, which in this case is nothing but the become the witness. And if you are able to do that, then this inner chaos which is there in your mind at this moment will begin to disappear. And that is the right way in which you should be fighting this battle. Okay, so the methodology of actually fighting or transacting in the world is now being planted in Arjuna's mind, saying that the way in which you should be living your life, the art of living, is based on transcending the dualities. Okay. And therefore transcending the dualities means that you're going to find yourself in the witness poise, and in that poise you will be able to transact in the life with equanimity and mental poise. So that equanimity is a very important word in the Bhagavad Gita. And yoga actually is described in 3 different ways in the Bhagavad Gita, as we'll see as we later. And one of them is yoga is samatva, equanimity. Okay. So how is this equanimity going to come about is what we shall then explore later on in this chapter. But this is, I think, we still got 5 minutes, but this is then now laying down the foundation for Karma Yoga. And Gurudev actually explains to us, the idea about yoga and what it really means, and equanimity, which is really the secret method of keeping the mind ever open to the outflow, which the mind is used to, and we will look at that in much more detail as we go along to the next few verses. Okay, so let's go to the next verse, which is verse number 39. Hereafter, the scheme of the Gita in this chapter is to explain the techniques of living ultimately the Vedantic philosophy in and through Karma Yoga. So now he has already kind of started off by talking about equanimity, about raising oneself beyond the dualities, and therefore that is the basis of Karma Yoga. And hence says the Lord in the 39th verse that this was the wisdom of Sankhya. Now listen to the wisdom of yoga. So let's chant that verse.
Yesha te vihita sankhe
Esha te vihita sankhe
buddhir yoge tvimam shrunu
buddhe yoge tvimam shrunu
buddhya yukto yaya partha
buddhya yukto yaya partha
karma bandham prahasyasi
karma bandham prahasyasi.
Okay, so this which has been taught to thee is wisdom concerning Sankhya. Now listen to the wisdom concerning yoga. Having known which, O Partha, you shall cast off the bonds of action. Okay, so the bonds of action, karma bandham. Okay, what does it mean, the bondage of karma? Now this is now focusing on karma, really, and the action, and therefore how to cast off these particular bondages which arise as a result of carrying out action in a certain way is what Lord Krishna is going to explain in the verses. And as he's saying that this was the wisdom of Sankhya so far, in other words, the way in which he has been explaining about the self, the eternality of the self, the indestructibility of the self, and how that is the true essence of oneself. That is all Sankhya. Okay, now he's going to explain to us about yoga, and this will take it up next time. So we'll stop there for the time being, and we'll conclude with the prayers. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu nirayaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kashchit dukha bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma mritam gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.